dancing, unfortunately. So rather the screen.
Perfect. I will just share the screen in a minute. Is the screen visible to all?
Perfectly, Michelle. Thank you.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Great. Perfect. So, so firstly, thank you all for your audience here today. And I know some of you are logging in from different time zones, different geographies, and truly appreciate your doing that. So good morning, afternoon, evening, and a very warm namaste from India. I very briefly want to thank both Peter as well as Anna for all their support to have this coordinated, and Nirmit for giving me this opportunity to have my thoughts presented to you and the group on the current India scenario. So without much ado, we'll go ahead and start the session. Okay. So the first slide, as you see, is a very crisp scenario of India as a country in terms of being a rising economic powerhouse, population of about 1.4 billion. So India has the second largest population in the world. I think the silver lining to that is that more than 50% of the population today is under 29 years of age. So it's a very large reservoir of skilled workforce for many decades, which would certainly help in the future generations and growth forward. India, as you know, is a federal union, which essentially means that it's a political unit with a number of states or provinces with the same central government, except the union territories, which don't have their own individual representative state governments, but are governed by the overall central government that sets the broad framework for the country. Having said that, the individual states, as you see, India has about 28 states. Each of them have their own autonomy in terms of being able to decide the administrative and economic, social, political working for each of the states and regions. GDP about $2.6 trillion. Having said that, I think the second quarter of this FY, India's GDP has seen a 24% decline, which has been one of the sharpest falls that the country has witnessed in the last many years, and that is certainly a matter of concern. FDI equity approximately 50 billion US dollars, and I'll just pause here and share that. So over the years, FDI equity in India has certainly increased and has been broad-based to include multiple industries and segments through the automatic FDI route, which essentially means that, for as long as you have industries and segments which are allowed FDI infusion, through this route, it does not require any prior government or RBI, which is the Reserve Bank of India, approval. We still have certain sectors in India which are not allowed FDI equity, essentially professional services, which is legal, accounting, real estate, architecture, etc. Foreign exchange reserves to the tune of about 555 billion until October 2020. And I must make a note here, I still remember, most of us would recall that in 1991, India, as part of the reserve management policy, had to pledge gold overseas so as to be able to raise funds. And I think from there to the journey that India has taken over the last many decades has been phenomenal and arduous. And one has seen a significant increase in the forex reserves. Exports, while has declined in comparison to the last FY, the same time, but in comparison to imports has been marginally better. Imports, of course, have declined again. So like I was saying, these were some of the challenges that we faced in the lockdown. If I were to look at some of the specific challenges due to the pandemic that India has witnessed in the last 6 months or so. So India today ranks second in the world in terms of the number of confirmed COVID cases. The silver lining, though, is that we have a 90% recovery rate, and I think we rank first in the world in terms of, the number of recovered COVID cases. Like Nidmit shared a short while ago when we began in terms of, especially Mumbai, I think, the rate of COVID has really, really declined, and I think that's very reassuring. Inflation, of course, is expected to ease towards the end of FY21. And one of the reasons also being because the consumer price index based inflation, which had stayed elevated over the last few months, um, is expected to soften during the course of the financial year. And that's something that the Reserve Bank of India's, has announced in their recent monetary policy report. Added to that, I think one expects if we were to have good monsoons in the coming year and no exogenous policy shocks, I'm sure things should get better. We discussed about the net exports. GDP, like I said, has contracted, which has been one of the worst declines. One also anticipates a V-shaped recovery, which is unlikely to occur during this fiscal year, but certainly would be over the next couple of quarters that spills into the new financial year. I think one challenge that India has faced is a spike in bad loans and liquidity and easy access to cash flows, putting huge stress on the banking sector. People have lost jobs, retrenchment, unemployment. So I think all of that put together has made this very, very difficult. India has seen about 5 phases of lockdowns, and each phase has also seen an unlock. And whilst the government tried to ease restrictions in each phase while they unlocked the lockdown, they also ensured that there was some kind of an economic stimulus package that was presented to be able to support the economy. And you can see over here that, we've had 3 stimulus packages, and the government is already talking about launching a fresh stimulus, which is aimed at creating employment and increasing demand. But if I were to very quickly summarize for you some of the things that the government has done, one is, of course, reduction in TDS, which means more cash on hand, more access to disposable income, collateral-free loans for a few small and medium sector enterprises, equity infusion through various funds, liquidity facility for NBFCs, mutual funds, relief to contractors, and I think also extension of a few registration and completion of real estate projects. So that's certainly helped. Coming to the industry impact, and I think this is very, very critical. If you look at the overall GVA, which is the gross value added, I think GVA clearly is the economic productivity matrix that provides a dollar value for the amount of goods and services that get produced vis-a-vis the cost, right? And one would observe a steep decline in the GVA, which is minus 9.3%, not a very healthy sign at all. Having said that, within the pandemic, you have multiple sectors that were severely impacted: financial services, real estate, professional services, the entire hospitality industry, airlines, travel, construction, because you had severe liquidity crunch and shortage of labor. I think a large chunk of daily wage laborers and earners are in the construction sector, which was out of jobs when supply chain networks being disrupted, mining and quarrying, essential utilities. I think the only sectors which really were not were kind of insulated in some way, I'd say, would be the essential services, which was typically agriculture, agri-based industries, chemical process, diagnostics, pharmaceuticals, medical devices to some extent, the consumer retail industry, e-commerce to some extent again, in terms of the industries that were impacted and insulated, if I could so say. In terms of the sector outlook, so I think the pandemic has clearly forced all of us to adopt digitalization in everyday life. And look at new habits, new ways of doing things, scout new business opportunities. And enterprises have had to really adopt to new normals and smartly diverse their operations. Um, if you see here, I think there are a couple of industry segments which clearly show green shoots for hiring. Healthcare diagnostic equipment for sure. So a lot of companies which were into the molecular diagnostic segment, which were into the COVID testing, have done exceptionally well. I know Roche certainly, has more than met their targets for the first 2 quarters. They kind of more than practically recovered what they lost in the first quarter. Pharmaceutical, in terms of some essential drugs that were required. India, as you know, is certainly getting more and more noticed into and becoming a favorable destination to be a clear alternate for contract manufacturing vis-a-vis China. The auto OE and auto components, we've seen India is clearly connected by the rail, and with the current COVID pandemic, more and more focus on wellness and people wanting to have their own travel to and fro to work and otherwise with their own vehicles. So one has certainly seen a slight demand in consumers wanting to buy vehicles, and with the OEMs doing well and having order books firmed up, you certainly have a cascading effect on the entire ecosystem of the auto component and ancillary. So that's done well as well. Agriculture was clearly classified in the essential services sector, and even during the pandemic, the ag input sector, which is essentially seeds, fertilizers, crop nutrients, agri equipment, I think all of these sectors certainly did well. Chemicals, if I do a quick recce of our own firm within 3P, I think more than 60% of our revenues have come from the chemical process sector. So clearly a sector on the upswing and very, very promising. Electric vehicle, allied infrastructure. So while there's a lot that's been spoken about the EV industry, however, there's lots that needs to be done on setting up the broad infrastructure ecosystem. And that's clearly a sector which is going to be doing well in times to come. A lot of focus on green energy. We're looking at robotics, automation. I read a very interesting article the other day, which talks about how robotics would actually replace millions of jobs in times to come, and how you're going to be having skill upgradation, reskilling, and all of that. That's going to be essential. E-commerce aggregators, I think the whole supply chain networks, technology, cloud, IoT, e-learning, edtech training, because more and more online is going to mean a lot more opportunities for these sectors. And I think lastly, what's going to be very essential is that the more we think of it, I think India is going to emerge as a very important link in the overall global supply value chain, right? So I think that's clearly very, very enterprising. Moving to some of the emerging roles, right? So I think given that the sectors I just spoke about have clearly green shoots in terms of how they would fare in the next 2 quarters, midterm, long-term view, and what are the kind of roles that we believe that could really open up in the India context. So clearly, there's a lot of use of mechanization, technology, digitization on the agriculture piece. India is, has the second largest arable land in the world, and therefore, if the agriculture industry were to do well, I'm sure you would have agronomists. That's going to be one role that would certainly be there for the keeps. Data analytics, data scientists, cloud computing, e-com, IoT, blockchain in terms of security, financial services, all of that. There's a huge focus on content development with e-learning, edtech training companies really doing well. And the use of that more and more getting into, organizations, and not just organizations, but also end users like all of us into our own homes, etc. Banking, integrating financial virtual banking applications. Exports is going to do very, very well. because with the new Make in India intervention that the government has been promoting, one expects and anticipates a lot of local manufacturing to happen, and that itself should, positively impact exports and in turn the forex revenues. Um, so that's clearly something. Logistics, for sure, in terms of aggregators, in terms of building supply chain networks, in terms of e-commerce, I think, logistics service providers, I think that's going to be key in times to come. I think this is going to be very important in terms of the India opportunity, right? So overall, the sentiment improves. As the sentiment improves, you have high income consumption that would normalize fast. You're looking at a networked India, a high digital penetration with the Make in India initiative that the government has been doing. The government has also been providing a lot of tender price preferences for Indian products, and that itself has been really pushing the Indian corporates to seriously considering local manufacturing. I think what this pandemic has really done is bring in a collective responsibility at all levels, right? So, foster a more humane understanding, empathy, hope in an attempt to normalize things post the pandemic. So, be it resilient agricultural sector, low crude oil prices, China's loss can be India's gain. There's a lot of anti-China sentiment, so there's a lot of focus on India emerging as an alternate destination for manufacturing, also being an important link in the global supply chain value network, strong, diversified industrial infrastructural base. I think political stability to some extent, and with the government really trying to ensure that they do what it takes to have the ease of doing business in India get a lot more simplified, eliminate red tapeism, data usage, digitalization, and smartphone usage again is very important, and that's essentially happening. What therefore would be the new normal going forward? So this is more from a talent perspective, right? What is the sense that we're getting? So more and more clients are expecting shortened hiring timelines with technology adoption. We're seeing a lot of acceptance to clients adopting to e-interviews, virtual joinings, e-onboarding. I think a very clear opportunity that has emerged from this is hiring beyond geographical boundaries, right? So you have clients in India who are being a lot more open to be able to bring in global talent, because you don't necessarily have to have these individuals being based out of India. And that gives you access to a wide array and flavor of global talent, which I think is phenomenal. A lot of new career pivots have become the new normal, people experimenting, focus on building a lot more inclusive workforces, remote hybrid workforces, focus on reskilling, retraining. I think what this pandemic has also done is really relook at emerging and declining job roles, right? So while you have a lot of new roles that are emerging, you would also have multiple of these that are on the decline and would require people to quickly reskill, train, move up the value chain. The whole focus of human resources is really going to be leveraging human capital from just delivering and deploying human resources. And I think diversity, look, so in India, a large portion of women, I think here's an opportunity for a large portion of women to rebuild their careers from home, because you no longer have challenges of, you can work out of remote, and more clients are being accepting of the fact. So I think that is clearly there. What we've also seen is some of India's latest set of incentives that the government has provided is looking at Samsung to Apple's supply partner showing keen interest in setting up bases in India and in South Asia. Also, the government, I think, has extended similar incentives to pharmaceuticals, and as we speak are wanting to cover and broad base those set of incentives to other industries and segments as well. I think far more reaching reforms which the government is really planning to do, which certainly is a positive trait. So that brings me to India 2020 and beyond. I think what we're really seeing is reset for a new mindset, survive, then thrive. So the focus is no longer long term, it's more immediate, midterm, sustain, and then move forward, looking at building markets which are sustainable, not just for the present, but also for tomorrow. Networked India, which essentially is a more digital India, a more connected India, a more inclusive workforce. Like I said, a young, proactive population. So you have a skilled workforce, language is an added advantage. So I think that makes India a very attractive proposition. Virtual healthcare. So the government has in the last couple of quarters done a lot in terms of how do you integrate virtual care platforms, e-pharmacies, providing post-care facilities to the elderly. The government has also launched an Arogya Setu mobile application, which helps trace in contact tracing and providing, it's more like a focal point that helps providing all the desired ecosystem of services to help address any issues with regard to the pandemic, advanced technology innovations, state-of-the-art infrastructure, and of course, like I said, integrated supply chain networks and hastened public-private interventions, right? So I think it's really the new India post 2020 and beyond certainly is fairly resilient. One is looking at building markets for tomorrow, and I think that's the growth that one anticipates. Yes, so on that note, I'd like to close the presentation and happy to address any questions that anyone may have. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much, Michelle. Very interesting overview. And I believe that, from my point of view, what I picked up here, and I could hear also this happening, from various channels. Made in India initiative connected to the products that are sold in the market, but are not made in India. I guess they get extra tax, right? Some kind of import tax. Whereas if you make it in India, obviously the price will drop significantly. But I think that what we see, and T&Ho probably can confirm this or maybe add to it, but there was a lot of panic in the markets, especially the technology companies like Apple, like Samsung, I don't know, that were very much concentrating on China, and they will be moving into the region, Vietnam's and Indonesia, Malaysia, etc. But I think that India should be able to pick up a lot of that. Foxconn, I understand, is planning to open a new facility, a large facility for Apple and for probably other companies. So what is the government doing to move with the speed? Because at the end of the day, I think to catch those organizations, and we're talking about annual contracts for the next 10, 15, 20 years, the government also has to be very fast before they start, and maybe they will spread across the region, but what is the government doing to invite them into the market?
Sure. So I think Peter, one of the things that the government of India is clearly doing is the current Prime Minister has really been riding on the sentiment to reassure people and countries that they must invest in India. There is a genuine attempt being made to do away with red tapeism. There is a lot of focus on building infrastructure, on easing the whole experience of conducting business within India, in terms of investments being made, in terms of new skill upgradations, technology adaptations, also a couple of SOPs being offered in terms of tax benefits, etc. Also in terms of land, right? Land and real estate, availability of land and real estate. So I think there's a lot that's being done to that extent. And I think moreover, the whole sentiment in terms of, having positioning India on a platform where people believe that yes, destination for growth and also political stability, and trying to ensure that there are a lot of public-private partnerships, trying to ensure that you have a lot of easy access to funding. So I think those are a few things that the government has been doing, or at least talking about, in the last couple of quarters.
And I guess this will also mean in the maybe mid to long term additional business for you, because those companies will be needing, let's say, executives as well as management to start running the business in India, right? So there will be a multiple new investments, and it's a large country with a huge population, so you never run out of workforce neither.
Yes. Absolutely, absolutely. I think one, that, and the other, the whole demographic divide, I think, is phenomenal. So that clearly gives us an added advantage, with, of course, the language proficiency. So I think that makes it a lot more easier.
Yeah, I was going to say that I think that your advantage, besides of all the other factors, I think is the language proficiency,
Yes.
compared to some other countries in Asia.
That's true.
I've got a question. Is India moving away from an export economy into a consumer economy?
So I wouldn't say that, because while the government is doing a lot to ensure that the whole Make in India initiative propagates organizations to kind of build in India, and then kind of, by doing that, they would obviously also look at exporting those rather than importing. So I would think that no, not really. I don't think that India is moving away from being an export economy. In fact, my sense would be that the Make in India initiative, if at all, would only help further propel exports in times to come. Yes, there is a lot of consumer focus. I think what also happened, Liam, is that in the last couple of years, in recent times, we've had a lot more evolved usage and infiltration of the whole digital smartphone usage, integrated networks. So that has certainly helped people evolve and look at it more from a consumer perspective. But to answer your question, I think this will only help propel the exports portfolio even more aggressively than before.
Michelle, from my side and dear 3P team, thank you very much for putting this together. It's a very interesting presentation that you did there, Michelle. So thank you very much. And I think what I'm loving is actually the positive message in there. So that's from the times that we've been speaking and looking at the last couple of months and what this pandemic has been doing to all of us to a certain extent. I think it's proving also how quickly India has taken the opportunity and adapted, right? Or is trying to adapt also quickly to the crisis situation, digitization, streamlining, efficiencies, and most compelling, I think, also making this all available to the entire world, right? So somewhat to Tia Nahua's point, but also what I was hearing from your presentation, my thinking was, well, how can we support even more as your affiliate network? How can we work in our countries and promote the India concept, or bring the India concept into what our clients are doing? And it's always been a location with, let's say, a certain amount of, let's say, high quality produce coming from a lower cost location, if I take it from our perspective. But suddenly this is becoming more and more available to our markets as well, because it's all this, that, right? It's e-learning, it's e-transformation. It's so suddenly workforce and talent can become available through the internet and through the technology that's available. Could you, maybe you've touched on some of the points, but just give some more insights or perhaps some of your thinking in regards to how we can position it best in our home markets to promote India and the concept and the talent, everything that you were describing there a little bit more for the future also?
Sure, Jens. I think firstly, thank you for your rhetoric, and I must say that my thought or response would be that one, what we're seeing is a lot of Indian companies are now willing to look at hiring talent beyond geographies, right? So I think the whole reluctance to have a critical strategic role being based outside of India and still have span of control for India is not there anymore. So more and more there could be opportunities for us to partner in terms of collaborative working and acquiring talent for our clients in India wanting to hire talent globally. Those individuals, by virtue of being based in those countries, clients would still require us to identify local talent, and that's where we would rely on your network. I think the network of Spengler Fox and the affiliates to be able to make that a win-win for both. If I look at the industries and segments where I also see a lot of green shoots in, I think clearly the pharmaceutical sector, because there is going to be a lot of focus happening there. Exports is clearly going to be another area with the whole Make in India initiative really taking a very serious how should I put it? I think it's a great opportunity in India, and there's a lot of, I know that on the ground, there's a lot that's being spoken, and companies seriously exploring that as an opportunity. The whole digitization, automation space, could also be another area where one could look at. The whole electric vehicle, green energy space is another sector where there could be opportunities to kind of, possibly look at talent being hired outside of India as well. So I do think it's what this pandemic has done, Jens. While of course you always had Indian companies wanting to seek and hire talent globally, but I think it's really hastened that in terms of one, the acceptability, because you're no longer restricted with physical boundaries of having the individual being based in India, right? And also the acceptability to be able to understand and align that could happen. In fact, I'm taking a leaf from David's presentation the last time, where his client was talking about how they hired a CFO for WWE, and they ensured that the CFO was not based in their own country of operations, and that was absolutely fine. So yeah, I think those could be clearly from a talent perspective, and also in terms of collaborative business development efforts, where we could kind of work closely to have a more targeted, focused campaign on what could be the sectors and emerging roles, and start creating some kind of a bench in terms of proactive candidates or executives who we believe could be huge revenue generators going forward. So I think that's how I would put it on the demand and supply side. Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you, Michelle. Sounds like a win-win to all of us.
Yeah, adding to that, I remember many years ago, when the big changes happened in Central Europe, and all the Central European countries kind of stepped away from Russia. They didn't want to do anything with Russia, not doing any business with Russia, because the 40 years was enough. And then 5-10 years later, many of those companies, Polish, Hungarian, Romanian, I don't know, Czech, etc., started to move back to the Russian market. And I remember us being there, being able to deliver. We have actually done a few exercises where we looked at the local large private and probably government-owned companies, how we could become the ambassador of the Russian market, because we are able to provide them the service. So we could do something similar here, where we list companies in various industries that are not necessarily in India, or they are not represented in India with manufacturing, or they are not represented with fully fledged, organization, but probably will consider going into India in the future, and then try to target them in Germany, in the UK, in Switzerland, I don't know, wherever those headquarters are, including USA, of course. I think that could be, I'm not saying it's going to be done in 5 minutes, and I don't think that we're going to be able to generate business from all of them, but I think that it could be a good idea. With your expertise in India, we could become partners in selling that idea, that we can help you, Mr. Client, Mrs. Client, help you, increase your footprint in India.
I think that's an excellent suggestion, Peter. Yes, absolutely so.
So this is something that we're going to put on the agenda and try to develop. It's going to require both work on your side and our side, and it's probably a longer project. But I think a good activity also to to reach out to clients we maybe didn't speak for ages with, not because of COVID, but for other reasons. But a good and the presentation you have made today, maybe we can make like a one-pager or a short one, just to as an icebreaker when we speak to those clients. I'm sure Lukasz can see lots of potential here also, and we have many ambassadors out there in the market. It could be a good exercise.
Absolutely. I think it's a good starting point, and we should certainly start doing that as a pivot. I think it would, we'd be very happy to help.
Any other questions from the floor? Ken, anything from Ireland perspective? Irish are all over the place, so I cannot imagine that they are not all over India now.
Yes, no, it's very, very interesting presentation. Thanks very much. We're not all over India. Well, there's a few of us over there. Indeed, my colleague who I work with here is from Bangalore, so I know a little bit about the market. And yeah, so if there's anything we can ever do to work with you, we'd love to do that. And I'm looking forward to reading the presentation in more depth later.
Likewise, Ken.